So you got a top 15 team coming to town on Saturday night. It's the first game back after a bye week. There's been a quarterback change. There's this, there's that. There's a lot of things to talk about with Pitt football right now. Heading into this game against Louisville on Saturday night. And there's a lot of things from the depth chart to talk about, and there's a lot of things from Pat Narduzzi's press conference yesterday to talk about. There's a lot of ground to cover. We're going to have a lot of material for this week's Morning Pitt. And on this episode, on the Tuesday Morning Pitt, I should be like hammering on the Christian Bear topic, and Phil Dracovic, and did he move to tight end or didn't he, and did Kenny Johnson and DeAndre Jules and Bam Bremen, all these different things on the depth chart. There's a lot of things, and maybe I'll get to them. Maybe I'll run out of steam on this thing I want to talk about, and we'll get to those topics. But there's something Pat Narduzzi said yesterday that I can't get out of my head, and it opened my eyes, my ears perked up when he said it yesterday. I went back over it a bunch of times and looked at it again. I'm going to play it for you here. I just can't, I don't want to say I can't get my head around it, because I think I can get my head around it. And I think I want to know what you think of it, because I know what I'm reading into it. I'm really curious about your thoughts. So we're going to talk about what I heard yesterday that stood out to me maybe more than anything else in 22 minutes of Pat Narduzzi's press conference. We'll talk about it right here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, that was the longest preamble, the longest cold open, as they say in Hollyweird. That was the longest one in the history of the Morning Pitt since we started doing those cold opens, because people complained about how it started and music and this and that. So we switched to the sort of the brief little welcome message, and then the little rock out ramp guitar right there, and then we jump into this. It's not really ramp guitar. I'm just trying to talk it up, and then we jump into the actual episode itself, and that was definitely the longest one we've ever had. I hope you people aren't just sort of accustomed to skipping ahead 30 seconds because you missed the opening of the episode, because we talked quite a bit. Now I'm going to tell you that you need to like this video and subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the place where you're going to get all of our video content. We have Pat Narduzzi's press conference from yesterday. It's live on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put that video up. We have these daily Morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, where we talk about everything Pitt and everything going on in Pitt sports to get your day started. We have our weekly live show. That's tomorrow night at 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have the post-game show. Got a live post-game show after every game. I almost said every home game. We do it after every game. The home games, we actually do it a little bit later. The road games, we start pretty much as soon as those things end. But the home games, we take a few hours, do post-game stuff, and then come back to the Panther-Lair offices and go live for an hour or so to talk about the game. This week with the 6:30 game against Louisville, thinking maybe 11:30 midnight, somewhere around there, we'll get started. The Wake Forest game a little bit later has been announced as a 3:30 game, so we'll have an earlier start to that one, probably 9 or 9:30, 10 o'clock at the latest if we really want to push it. But we go live after the game. You want to make sure you don't miss any of those live post-game shows or the live streams on Wednesday night. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. When you subscribe, you can turn on notifications so you get an alert sent right to your phone. You might forget about it. You might forget we have the post-game show. You say, oh, darn it, I missed the live stream this week. You don't have to miss it because you can get an alert if you turn on notifications. But to get the notifications, you have to subscribe. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then, of course, the website, Panther-Lair.com. Pittsburgh.rivals.com for all the Pitt sports news and lots of conversation and discussion happening there. Now, sometimes when I'm like putting these videos together, sitting down to talk about it, or sitting down to, just sitting down to record, I try to think about, like, what's the headline going to be? What are we going to call this thing? What am I going to put on the thumbnail and the title of the video and all of that? And I'm going back and forth about something like the most interesting thing Pat Narduzzi said on Monday or something like that. You want to get something catchy, something that would really draw people's attention in. So I'm going to keep thinking about that as we go. But Narduzzi said something yesterday. Okay, setting the scene, right? It's the weekly press conference, the first weekly press conference since before the Virginia Tech game. They didn't have one last week. Nobody from Pitt talked to the media last week. It was probably by design that way. I think typically if the season is not off to a 1-4 start, 0-4 against FBS teams, and looking at a really tough situation, typically they might have some players or something talk to the press at midweek just to keep some keep Pitt out there in the newspapers and whatnot. But they didn't do that this week, and understandably so, because the team's in a really bad spot. So we talked to Pat Narduzzi yesterday, and it was the first time we've talked to him. He talked after the Virginia Tech game. Before that, he had his Thursday press briefing, and before that, he had his Monday press conference. So it's been 2 weeks since his last Monday press conference, and obviously news since then, the news of Phil Dracovic getting benched for Christian Bear. Now, that understandably dominated a lot of the conversation. Whether it was Dracovic, the decision to bench Dracovic, how his teammates responded, how Phil reacted to that news, what Christian Bear can do, what he has shown them in practice. Is Phil Dracovic going to play tight end? It covered a lot of ground, all related to that topic. But at one point, our good friend Will Graves from the Associated Press, despite the shortcomings of his higher education, asked a question about sort of the process of recruiting transfer quarterbacks and whether it needs to be reevaluated. I'm going to play this clip for you. And I'm including Will's question just because I think you need the setting of it. Now, I have to apologize. You're not going to hear Will's question all that great, largely because we record this, obviously use a camera to record the video, but we plug in with a mic cable into the sort of official audio feed. Now, the problem with the audio feed is that you don't get a lot in the way of audio of the questions. You get Pat Narduzzi talking into the microphone, and that comes through loud and clear, but you don't really pick up the questions all that well because ultimately we're relying on whatever gets from the questions into Pat Narduzzi's mic, right? So you're not going to hear Will's question that great, but what Will says is he says, Pat, when you look over, and I'm paraphrasing here. I could have just transcribed it and read it word for word, but he says, when you look over, the transfers that you've gotten, Peterman obviously did some good things, and Narduzzi chimes in, he interjects. He says, I saw him. I think he was pretty good here, blah, blah, blah. Says, Max Brown, Will goes on. He says, Max Brown, got hurt. Maybe didn't do this or that, Keaton, blah, blah, blah. And so he's listing off these quarterbacks. And when he gets to Keaton Slovis, Pat Narduzzi interjects. And I want you to hear this. I want you can watch it. You can watch Narduzzi's response. You can hear his interjection. This is it. So we'll start at the beginning of Will's question. Don't crank your volume way up to hear what Will is asking, because Narduzzi's going to come through loud and clear, and that's ultimately what you need to hear.
And when you look at the transfer QBs that have come in, Peterman obviously had some success, but
he was pretty good.
Well, Max, had some injuries and really didn't play the level he wanted to. Keaton,
I liked Keaton a lot.
Inconsistent.
He's a good football player.
Last year.
I like Keaton a lot. He's a good football player. That's a direct quote. You heard that. I know you couldn't hear Will's question all that much. And shout out to Will Graves for asking that question and getting that on the radar and getting that, eliciting that response. Particularly with the way he phrased the question, he elicited that response. But Pat Narduzzi interjects. He interrupts and says, I like Keaton a lot. He's a good football player. And I think he said, I liked. Past tense. I liked Keaton a lot. He's a good football player. Now, you could compare and contrast that with, Pat Narduzzi's quote from December or January, whenever it was. I think he was on the radio. He said, quote, we knew there was a chance we were going to lose our quarterback. We knew there was a chance we wanted to lose our quarterback. Compare and contrast those two, and it's kind of interesting. Now, what stood out to me isn't that Narduzzi is sort of seemingly contradicting himself and either sort of, spouting off a little bit. Either he spouted off then when he was trying to talk about why they pursued Phil Dracovic and how excited they are to have him, or he's spouting off now, just trying to interject and interrupt Will's question as often as he can. But that quote, I liked Keaton a lot. He's a good football player. I couldn't get that out of my head. And I couldn't get that out of my head because, for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which is the last 10 months have been all about how much better a player and a leader Phil Dracovic is than Keaton Slovis. And we've heard that from a lot of people, right? We've heard the players talking about the leadership of Phil Dracovic. We've heard Pat Narduzzi talk about that. We heard Frank Cignetti say pretty clearly that they intended to bring in Phil Dracovic and that they decided that before Keaton Slovis ever decided he was going to transfer. And never mind that never mind the timelines. Don't try to figure that out. But the implication, and I don't even know if it was just implied, I think he might have clearly said it, that Kedon Slovis, they wanted to bring in Phil Dracovic to compete with Kedon Slovis, and Kedon didn't want to compete, so he left. I think we've talked a lot. About how Kedon Slovis and Frank Cignetti never really seemed to mesh, never really seemed to gel. And I think he came through in the play on the field. I think he came through in the performance, the execution, the play calling, and then, kind of what we heard behind the scenes. That those two never really were able to work together as well as you need your quarterback and your offensive coordinator to work together. And so this, I think, is why the Narduzzi quote stuck out to me so much yesterday. Because if we've heard and sort of observed that Slovis and Cignetti didn't really mesh that well, and now Narduzzi is saying, I liked Kedon. He's a good football player. And then we move forward to sort of 2023, where although there's some context that's necessary, if we just compare raw numbers to raw numbers of Kedon Slovis and Phil Dracovic, you end up with Dracovic, 818 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Slovis, 1,240 yards, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. BYU, 4-1, including a win over a team that Pitt lost to in Cincinnati. Pitt, 1-4, with no wins over FBS competition. Now I'm play another quote for you, and this is again from yesterday, and this follows a line that Narduzzi has given in the past. So earlier this season, particularly when I asked him who's making the decision when it's time to bench a quarterback or make a change, and this is what Narduzzi said yesterday, and it largely echoes what he has said in the past. Here's what he said yesterday.
Frank ultimately is going to make that decision, Amanda. But we had conversations for sure, but I think anytime you step overboard and say, hey, I think you need to do this, I just don't think it works well. But Frank ultimately makes that call, and I'll either say yay or nay.
So I'm piecing this all together. It's Cignetti's call. Cignetti makes the decisions on the quarterbacks, who plays, who sits. Seemingly had interest in replacing Kedon Slovis with Phil Dracovic, a decision that may or may not seem misguided at this point. And I'm not entirely, I don't know if I entirely buy the whole narrative or timeline of we wanted to bring in Dracovic to compete with Slovis, and Slovis decided he didn't want to compete. Kind of feel like decisions were made, maybe not necessarily in that order, but okay. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about Cignetti having the 100% control, total autonomy over those decisions, and seemingly picking the wrong guy. If it's picking between Dracovic and Slovis, Slovis looks like a better player. Somebody asked me this in my mailbag last week on Friday. He said, who would you take? I mean, clearly it looks like Slovis is a better player than Phil Dracovic. And we top that off with Narduzzi's interjection. I liked Kedon. He's a good football player. Maybe I'm piecing together a bunch of things that aren't there. Maybe I'm looking at it and I'm just sort of thinking of it in my own way. But I think we're seeing things come together here. I think we're seeing things come together with regards to the way the quarterback position has been handled over the past 18 games and year and a half. I mean, ultimately dating back to December 21, January 22, somewhere around there, whenever Frank Cignetti was hired. How the quarterback position's been handled since then, how the offense has been handled since then, and Pat Narduzzi continuing to sort of wash his hands of that side of the ball. Over and over and over again. Said previously, he spends 85% of his meeting and film and meeting time with the defense. Said yesterday it was about 80%. Says on the practice field, he's out there. He's over all, overseeing all of it. He's watching for who's working hard and this and that. He's watching offense and defense. But when he's in the building, when he's in the meetings and film sessions and all those things, he's with the defense. It's all defense. Everything that's happening on offense is under Cignetti's purview. All the decisions that are being made are Cignetti's to make. Why did this team go 8-4 in the regular season as opposed to 10-2? Offense. Why are they 1-4 right now as opposed to 4-1? Offense. What is Pat Narduzzi removing all ties to right now? Even going so far as to praise the quarterback who was either pushed out or, the door was opened for him to leave. I got one more quote, one more clip. I'm going to play it for you. This is again from Narduzzi's press conference yesterday. And I think we'll play this one.
When you talk about evaluating a quarterback, it starts with me. And, we just got to do a better job at that position. And again, like I said, it's not all the quarterback. But I like our talent on our football team. We just got to execute better. And we got to coach them better. We got to call better plays.
We have to do a better job at that position. We got to coach them better. We got to call better plays. Now, maybe it's just a coach running through the word salad. And everybody's got to do a better job. Everybody's got to do a better job. I don't know. You tell me. You tell me what you make of all of that. The Keaton Slovis thing. I mean, honestly, it's a 180. It's an about face from everything we've heard out of this program regarding that player since last December. Since the time he left. That's all we've heard out of coaches and players is negative. Negative about leadership, negative about on-field play. And they didn't all like trash him, but it was all through the guise of Phil is going to be that much better. Phil is going to be that much better of a leader. He's going to be that much better of a fit for the offense. He's going to be that much better of a player. And now here we are. Pitt's 1-4. The offense has been terrible. The quarterback play has been, far below average, far below what's needed. I liked Keaton. He's a good football player. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Probably am. Probably should spend today talking about what Christian Bear can bring to the field and all this difference. I mean, there's a lot of other things we could talk about, but I just couldn't get that out of my head. I don't know. Sort of feels like some things are coming together here. But we'll see. Tomorrow we'll get back to talking about Christian Bear. We'll talk about the defense. We'll talk about the offense. We'll talk about some of the other things on the depth chart because there actually were other interesting things on the depth chart, not just the quarterback position. But this one, we had to sidetrack for this because this is something I think when it's December, we're going to come back to these quotes and bring them up. I think we'll reference it. I think I will. Somebody remind me. I have to set a reminder for myself on December 2nd or whatever it is. The 10-10-23 Morning Pitt. Go back and revisit some of the quotes that Pat Narduzzi gave on 10-9. 10-10. That should be easy to remember. Somebody remind me on 10-10. All right? Well, remind me on 12-1 or 12-2 to go back and re-listen to the quotes from 10-10. All right, tomorrow we're going to get into more depth chart breakdown. We're going to be looking ahead at Louisville, look at 5 players to watch for the rest of the season. I'm going to do all those things over the next couple of days. We'll get to as many as we can over the next few days in advance of the mailbag on Friday. Of course, if you want to be a part of the mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt, you can always post your questions on Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, and then come over here, like this video, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you've had a great start to the week already. It's Tuesday. It's cold, but we are motoring forward, and we will catch up with you tomorrow here on the Morning Pit on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.